load in this thing and see what it does. That's very lean. So that was about 5 pounds, and it was really, really lean once we got up into that boost area. So what I have done is again, this still is gonna have to this is just tuning at this point. We're still gonna have to scale this and adjust our fuel ratios. It wasn't knocking, but it was only 5 pounds, and it was only, how many RPM? 3,000 RPM. So I just upped the scale in here where it was on the map, and we're gonna see if that fixed it, and then we'll touch in the fuel. But it did it. That's kind of the important bit, is that it did it. So I'm going to play around with this a little bit, and I'll let you guys know how it goes. So here's where we're at. I just started loading it up more. Got about 8 pounds, 4,000 RPM, something like that. And it started going lean, and we got a little knocking. But that's because the ignition table is going to be off too, and we were a little lean. So this is just going to come down to tuning now. So I know that the car is not going to make more than 22 pounds of boost. So what I'm going to do is go to the map sensor reference and find how many volts 25 pounds is. I'm going to set that at my 100. And then I'm going to scale it to where I know we're good for driving around, which is right here. Scale that up, and that should scale that properly for basically speed density. Because everything's working. Tuning adjustments are working. The compensation numbers are a little different, which is to be expected because of the RPMs and everything. So, okay, so it's actually the next day. I had somebody show up that needed diagnostics on their Frontier. So let's pick up where we left off. Starts up mint, guy. All right, like I said, I've got the voltage scaling here for the sensor, so I'm going to go ahead, and we've got 26 psi is what we're going to go with at 1.57 volts. That's what we're going to set our 100 at. So I'm going to just do all that setup while the car is warming up. We'll flash it, and then we'll get back to testing this out. Okay, so we have this all set up. Now, this may look a bit ridiculous, like we're not using any of this, but this shows the basically infinite scalability of doing this versus a mass airflow sensor. So we can go up to 100 PSI absolute, which is 80 something PSI with this map sensor, which will never do that much boost. So it's infinitely scalable as long as you set it up with the map sensor the right way the first time. So did 1.44 volts, which on here is, where are we at? It is 26.7, well, it's about 26 pounds. This is a CVT car, never gonna make more than 20. So I gave myself some headroom, and that is my 95%. So now we're gonna go into a volumetric flow ratio, and we're gonna actually change this so that it doesn't exactly match it, but we're gonna give ourselves some headroom. We're gonna go to 100 on there, and then we're gonna scale this over so that now we have even more room up here to work with. And our ignition timing is done off of our base fuel schedule, which is going to be a different thing that we have to work with. But now that we have everything working, it's just a matter of tuning the car. So I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to chip away at tuning the car. I will start logging horsepower when I start doing wide open throttle pulls, because this is going to take a little while. But as a proof of concept, this works. It works. So we're just going to see if it works at full throttle, and then we'll see if it works on the street later on. That's working. Fantastic. This right here is why I do not like those side mount intercoolers. Look how hot that is from some low power, like 14, 15 PSI boost pulls. That's horrible. That's why we need to get a front mount, people. So it's just tweaking at this point, but it's working. I mean, it made 170 horsepower, which remember this is a CVT, 146,000 miles on it. I'm not really pushing it because, again, this is proof of concept. It's working. I'm just going to get the tune dialed in a little more. I'm also starting to play around more with how much mass airflow I can pull out, like how much of this percentage I can pull out in order to bring my volumetric flow ratio more that way to give us more headroom. So I'm playing with that right now, and it's working as I figured it would. So I'm just going to pick around with that a little bit more, and then I'll probably let it sit for about an hour, cool down, do another pull to make sure when it's cold it works, and then it's going to be ready for a street drive. Just to show what I mean about the scalability of it, so that last pull was the same amount of boost, 15, 16-ish PSI, and what I did compared to the pull before that is I went in here and I pulled this back to reduce how much volumetric flow that would calculate out, and instead of being all the way over here up against the edge of the map, the limits of it, we shifted all the way over to here to the 80% range, which means I can go lower with that and shift it that way, which means we can run more boost and tune more this way. So this works. I mean, this works. I mean, maybe we'll find out when it gets driven. Perhaps, you know, we need a smaller map sensor so we can more fine tune over here. I don't think that's going to be the case, but this works, like, without a doubt. We still have electronic throttle control on. Right here, electronic throttle control's on. There's no sense in beating the crap out of this car anymore. It's only making like 180 horsepower right now. It's a CVT. The point of this wasn't to make power. This was supposed to see if this worked, and it does. So I'm going to leave this on here for the street drive and pull it off, and then in a little while take it for a little rip and see how it drives around at low loads, because we know that it works fine at high loads. We just need to see how it does at like a low load, light throttle, which might just require some more tuning. Unfortunately, I don't have an eddy brake on this dyno, and the company I bought the dyno from went out of business, so I can't get one. So I can't really tune any of this on here right now. Kind of is what it is. So I'm going to flash this, and we're just going to leave it be. This works. I mean, it's speed density. We are tuning based off of pressure and RPM by just manipulating the way that it calculates the volumetric flow ratio. It's that simple. It even, if you look at the timing targets, so you can see this is based off base fuel schedule, which is going to take boost into account. You can see how far over we are. On a stock MAF at 18, 19 pounds of boost, you would normally be somewhat over here. You could play with the MAF scaling to move it over here, but you're eventually going to hit that 5-volt wall. But we just proved that we can indefinitely move this over and over to give us more headroom for more and more boosted power. So I'm going to explain what's next in a minute. The plan is eventually this, and it looks a little complicated, but I'll explain it. So this right here is our flex fuel sensor. Let's pretend. This right here is our intake air temp sensor, and this right here is a new intake air temp sensor signal. I'm still working on making that display as analog, but that's neither here nor there. So the issue right now is when you run flex fuel, you can't increase your ignition timing automatically. You don't have flex fuel. You have to put a specific amount of ethanol in the car, and then you have to have a special tune specific for that, which just makes it a pain in the butt and makes it so that it's almost not repeatable, because getting an exact mix of ethanol in the car is very hard. Pardon my daughter in the background. She's playing with her Legos. So the idea is the car's ECU will actually add timing as a programmed amount as intake air temps go down, pull timing as intake air temps go up. And it also does the same thing for a couple other things, such as fuel compensation. It will add fuel as air temp changes and pull fuel as air temp changes. So the idea is we're going to take advantage of that and make it into a flex fuel system. The car will still retain its ability to adjust its intake air adjust based off intake air temp, but we will be able to make it so that it adjusts off the flex fuel. So if I start this simulation, so we're at 100 hertz on the flex fuel sensor, which is 50% ethanol, and we're going to assume that it's really, really hot, and we're at 4 volts on our intake air temp sensor. Now, typically that would pull, let's say, 4 degrees of timing. Well, if we have 50% ethanol, we want to put 3 degrees back in. So we can go into our map for compensation and change that value and change the range of values so that it lines up with how we want to tune this. So the car will still be able to add or remove timing. It's just we can also have it so that it increases that based off of this. And the way we do that is a little equation, which I'm still dialing in the code. So basically what we do is we take our ethanol content, which is 50% right now. We have our reduction ratio, which is what you would tune the table, which I'm going to be writing software for tuning. So that takes your temperature in voltage, multiplies it by your reduction percentage, which is tied to an ethanol content, and it will output a new temperature voltage, essentially shifting that adjustment where we want it. So it's flex fuel. That is flex fuel. It's not the prettiest way to do it, but it is a way to do it that retains some of the safety of intake air temperature adjustment, but it also allows you to actually get a flex fuel system going. Because remember, you can only compensate fuel by 25% on the lambda reading, and you can't add timing. So this is the best way to add fuel and add timing using the OEM software. Now, the only drawback to this is this will not work with UpRev. This is EcuTech only. And the reason for that is UpRev doesn't have a means of adjusting how much timing and fuel is pulled up for intake air temps, where EcuTech does. So all the testing we did today on the map sensor thing was to just verify that we can get speed density, which gets one hurdle out of the way. Now we can move on to adding flex fuel to these cars. Now the direct injection system is still going to be very, very limited, but this will increase the ability to make horsepower on a stock turbo, because we'll be able to add significantly more timing and get rid of some of that heat generated by the factory turbo. It would not surprise me if on flex fuel with this system, we could get 300 horsepower on a stock turbo reliably, because we're going to be making up for the inability for the turbo to flow and make boost by adding ignition timing, which is what you need to do, which is why this is no different than adding meth injection. By adding meth injection, you can add more timing, which increases your power. So the plan is, I have a EcuTech car that is available to me. We are going to do just the flex fuel on that. As soon as I dial all this in and get it working, we're going to do just the flex fuel on that and see what we can get out of it. Now that car is already making 300 horsepower and a big turbo. So what we will do is essentially just try to match the power and run it on ethanol on less boost, just to prove that this works. We could run more than 300 horsepower, but on a factory engine, that's kind of sketchy. But if we can bring the boost down, we can go a little bit up. But yeah, that's how this works. So like, as an example, if we watch our temp out value, if I change the ethanol content to, let's say, 20%, oh sorry, 75% ethanol, I gotta speed this up in the real thing. We now have a different temp output voltage. If our intake air temps change, we have a different temp out voltage. So it works in theory. So now it's just a matter of getting the hardware together. I'm not going to use an Arduino Uno, but getting the hardware together and getting everything hooked up for testing. But this should work. This should allow flex fuel on these cars with EcuTech. This could be applied to pretty much any car that runs EcuTech or UpRev that has the adjustment features for intake air temperature. So that's kind of the plan we're working with right now.